economic business, all the other things that we deal with. Today is not a minerals meeting. We're having banking and business development today. So looking forward to seeing different faces here that we don't normally see. So we'll get started. Mark, would you call the roll, please?
Representative Campbell.
Here.
Representative Knapp.
Excused?
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Riggins.
Excused.
Representative Schmidt.
Here.
Representative Tarver.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Here.
Chairman Heiner.
Here.
Thank you.
Representative Knapp is presenting in another committee on the other side of the hallway, so he's excused this morning. He has left proxy votes for these two bills. Majority Floor Leader Nethercott, welcome to our committee. Thank you for being here. If you will introduce yourself for the record, then you can continue.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Senator Tara Nethercott representing District 4. It is a House custom, by the way, for House committees, but it's good to exercise it. Good to be with my counterparts on House Minerals as I serve on Senate Minerals, so look forward to seeing you in the interim. Good representatives you have in front of you, Senate File 143, Public Monies, Deposits, and Credit Unions. This bill has come before the legislature over the course of time with different outcomes, and I'm hopeful that this year we can see it reach the finish line, because I think it's time that we provide this for the people of Wyoming. So the bill in itself is very simple. All it simply does is everywhere that our Wyoming banks are allowed to accept public deposits, we are adding the statement credit unions. And that's all the bill does. And so it puts credit unions on equal footing with banks in our state. And that allows for them to more effectively serve our constituents and the people of Wyoming. So that's the bill. Credit unions, there's a reference to additional requirements for the credit unions. All the credit unions in the state are subject to the same safety measures associated with banks, such as the FDIC, which provides insurance up to $250,000 for those deposits. Credit unions have the same program through the National Credit Union Association. So those consumer protection issues or safety measures are still in play for credit unions, just as they are for banks. And so the people's money as deposited in those credit unions are as safe and secure as they are in our banks here in Wyoming. So, Mr. Chairman, questions on the bill itself, and we can maybe get to the why. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the bill itself.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader Nethercott. Committee, any questions for Senator Nethercott? Senator, we've seen over the past years where some banks have been rescued by the federal government. Have there been any credit unions that have also been supported by federal insurance?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Chairman. Credit unions are supported by their members, and they're fundamentally structured differently, like a co-op. And so banks are funded by their shareholders with the primary purpose on profit. And credit unions obviously have a different mission, which is to serve their members. I think it's important to recognize and want to stay away from either institution as superior. Both serve the people of Wyoming incredibly well. I use both institutions in my business and personal life, and I'm sure most of you do as well. So I think that the comparison of either can be a dangerous road to go down, just because I know our Wyoming banks are working hard to serve our constituents too, and they deserve credit for what they have done. But I think it's not fair to continue to deny the right of our constituents and their taxpayer money to have access to credit unions who do so much in our communities as well. I think one of the most compelling reasons, though, to get to your concern over banks, and that has to do with what we have seen with our national banks with debanking. And that debanking is denying services or deposits associated with, quite frankly, our legacy industries in Wyoming. So anything associated with fossil fuels, firearms, and other issues that we're familiar with, that would be generally contrary to Wyoming values. So there are Wyoming public deposits in those national banks here in Wyoming. Of course, they can take those deposits, but our local Wyoming credit unions who are serving our local communities are not allowed. And so that seems a bit disingenuous. The banks get very upset when I talk about this debanking of the national banks, and so I want to make sure that it's very clear. I am not referencing any Wyoming state chartered bank. They are not exercising any practices associated with our national banks on the debanking front. So a big shout out to our Wyoming banks. They are not denying access to the banking services associated with firearms or fossil fuels or any of those traditional concerns that we have. But our national banks are doing that, and our public deposits are located in some of those banks, and I don't think that's maybe the right policy for Wyoming. I think that allowing our local governments and our state to evaluate all of the financial institutions within their communities for those deposits is the right choice for Wyoming.
Thank you, Senators. So this bill doesn't force our local governments to deposit their money into either credit unions or banks. It allows them to choose. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. And so typically what most public institutions do, or our government entities do, is they put an RFP out for financial institutions that are interested in providing that service. And then those financial institutions respond, and then they have a list of identified financial institutions of which to do business with. This would allow those credit unions to competitively bid as well for those opportunities, and just puts them on that same opportunity platform.
Thank you. Vice Chair Tarver.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Senator, for presenting this bill. And I was just curious, what type of pushback have you received from this bill? And if any, could you please explain that to us?
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, I can explain some of it. Of course, the banks can speak for themselves, but generally it has to do with the unfairness that they perceive. And that's as a result of the federal regulations associated with banking. And so commonly you'll hear that they have to pay taxes associated with their earnings because their structure is different. And that puts them at an uneven playing field when it comes to financial success of the institution. And they like the advantage that they have in Wyoming by disallowing credit unions who don't have some of the same federal regulatory prohibitions that they do. That's the primary concern.
Follow up, Vice Chair? Okay, any other questions for the Majority Floor Leader? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation and for being here. Do we have any other elected officials who would like to come forward? Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Thank you,
Good morning.
members of the committee. Appreciate the words of Senator Nethercott and her work on bringing this forward. This is,
Would you introduce yourself for the
my
record?
name's Lloyd Larson. I serve in the House of Representatives from House District 54. Thank you, Mr.
Please
Chairman.
proceed.
My association or connection to this effort goes back to 2014, my first year in the legislature, when we have been trying to allow communities that didn't have banks but had credit unions in their communities to be able to put their public funds rather than driving extensive distances to deposit their public funds in a bank. And we, as Senator Nethercott noted, we've come up short. I've never, interestingly enough, Mr. Chairman, I've never had any funds in a credit union. I solely have used a bank, but just never could understand this prohibition on allowing public funds to be in a credit union. It made sense to me. They're in our communities. They're safe. I just didn't get it. And so as we worked on that, and there was always substantial pushback, and I would just highlight historically that a little bit of the concern has been on two areas. One is constitutionality, and the other is on just legislatively. Our Constitution was drafted, and I had an AG opinion drafted in 2015 that researched the historic issues relating to credit unions. And in the Constitution, it says that public funds should be deposited in a bank where practicable. And the Attorney General opined on that and went back to the Constitutional Convention and why that language is used, and reminds us that banks were the only financial institutions around at that time. And that in the early territorial days that there may not be a bank in your community, in your town, and so it may not be practical. And so they kind of lay that format out there, and then they come back into the legislative history of that, and they note about national and state banks, and then in 1977, the legislature allowed savings and loans to be depositories for public funds, which are not banks, structured differently, but provides, like credit unions, provide some of those same services. And so the conclusion of the Attorney General was that the legislature took a broad view of the constitutional definition when they then allowed savings and loans to be to receive public funds, very similar to what this bill does, which would allow credit unions to do the same thing. And they just, in the conclusion of that Attorney General opinion, it just really is that this section that we're in today in the bill needs to be amended to include credit unions to make that possible, which is exactly what this bill does. And so it really set aside and put a very broad term on the constitutional, and didn't think that allowing credit unions would run afoul of that, because we had already done it with savings and loans. So, Mr. Chairman, appreciate there's a lot of history. It's pretty fun, and appreciate the work that Senator Nethercott's done. She's really been very thorough on this, and appreciate the work, and I would certainly hope that you can support this.
Thank you, Representative Larson. Any questions for the good representative? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Any other elected officials or any officials from the departments of the state? Any departments of the state? Any citizens that are present here in the room? Any citizens that have come to testify? Seeing none, now we'll go on to those representing organizations. Welcome. Ashley.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bill Novotny. I'm a Johnson County Commissioner. I'm here today on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Johnson County is in a unique situation. We do not have a credit union operating in our county. And so you might ask yourself, why is a commissioner from Johnson County here advocating for this? Because it's good public policy. I think of the town of KC, where they have 3 town employees. When the clerk needs to make a deposit, she either convinces one of our county deputies to drive it up to Buffalo, or she closes town hall and does it herself. Credit unions, like banks, fully insured. This is a safe depository. You're going to hear from our friends from the Wyoming Association of Municipalities about 2 communities that this directly impacts: the town of Wright and the town of Shoshone. Our organization stands in strong support. This is not picking winners and losers. This is just adding another option, another financial tool for our treasurers when each year they present us with a list of depositories where county funds may be deposited. I love my community bank. I also appreciate the fact that I'm still a member of that credit union that I joined in college. This is a good bill. This is good public policy, and I would encourage you to move it forward and let the whole body have a say in this important matter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions for the Commissioner? Seeing none? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you as well.
We are here to support this bill. We wholeheartedly support all of our financial institutions that are the fabric of our communities, but we are just looking for more tools in the toolbox for our local communities that serve 70% of the constituents in the state of Wyoming. And I'll leave further explanation of that with my mayor, Joel Highsmith from Shoshone, who's maybe shopping around for a business project for a malt shop.
All right. Mayor, let's hear all about it.
Chairman, representatives, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Myself, the town of Shoshone fully supports this bill. We do have a credit union in Shoshone that we'd love to be able to deposit. There, we have to, there again, we have to deliver our cash money to Riverton. Either our clerk or our chief of police takes it. It'd be very good to be able to do that, and it's good to have a financial institution within the borders of Shoshone that knows the town and to look at help business projects and stuff like that. Other than that, I'm going to try to cut this short, and if you have any questions, open for questions, but thank you. And
Any questions
appreciate
for
you
the mayor?
considering this.
Yes. Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify, so the town, all the town's accounts are through the credit union there?
No, we have no accounts in the
Mr.
credit
Mayor?
union because we cannot use what? Oh, excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, please proceed. Yes.
Okay, excuse me. The question was, does Shoshone have any accounts in the Atlantic City Credit Union? Is that correct? No, we do not. We're not allowed to do that. Currently, we'd love to, we can't even deposit our money. We do banking actually in 3 different banks in Riverton.
Thank you.
Follow up, Representative Campbell? Mr. Mayor, I have one small question. When will you get the malt shop back? I missed that terribly.
Well, we do too. The current owner is out of Casper and he bought it because of the history. He's a history buff. He always said sort of heck no, but last summer he gave me a maybe.
well.
Because his life is changing. So that was been one of my goals as when I was on my bucket list when I got elected mayor was for the town, and even when I was on the city council, to purchase that building and bring it back. We do have at least one young lady, well, she's young compared to me, but worked there when she was really young, that has the recipe, knows how to make the malts and the ice cream, everything that went into those great malts that we're so well known for, but we're working on it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to get off track here with the malt shop, but Representative Lawley, please.
I had to jump in here. I live in Orland and I loved that malt shop. It was always a stop on my way through, usually to Casper, but, and on the way back. And I really wish you well with that endeavor because it is historic. They make the most fabulous malts. And so I wish you luck with that.
I appreciate it, Representative.
Mayor, it sounds like you have a lot of support here. So, thank you. Any other questions for the mayor? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for being here. Any other organizations that would like to speak? Happy Valentine's Day. Good morning. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. My name is Bobby Frank. I'm here representing Wyoming's credit unions. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill this morning. We do have a number of credit union representatives here as well as online that are available to answer any of your questions, but out of respect for your time, Mr. Shane here and I will cover our input on Senate File 143. Mr. Chairman, all of you should have a hard copy of a white paper and some handouts. I'll reference those throughout my testimony. First, I would just like to give you an overview of the credit unions in Wyoming. Credit unions in Wyoming, 23 credit unions in Wyoming serve 330,000 credit union members, employ 900 individuals, and contribute $178 million to Wyoming's economy. If you look in your stack of handouts, you will find an independent economic report published by Oxford Economics that highlights an overview of the economic impact of our local credit unions here. Mr. Chairman, obviously there is a hindrance in the state to local governments as well as credit union members in being able to do business through their credit unions. I'm going to provide you with some examples. They're also highlighted in the issue paper that's included in your packet. In addition to the fact that the local governments and special districts, as well as the state, are unable to deposit funds in credit unions, we have encountered issues with members of credit unions, an ag producer in Fremont County who was approved for a state farm loan and wanted that loan administered through his credit union, and that was unable to occur because of this public deposit prohibition. In addition, I would like to give some examples. Julie Dunham, the president and CEO of Sunlight Federal Credit Union, is online. She had a glitch with getting registered, but she has shared that she has had hospital district, school district, as well as the county seek to do business with Sunlight, especially after Bank of the West pulled out of the Worland area. She's unable to accommodate any of those. Over in Albany County, the credit union volunteers its service to staff the junior livestock auction for the 4-H and FFA program. When they do that, they collect all of the money for the sale of the animals during fair, and they must take it back and lock it in the safe. And the following week, the fair manager comes and picks that up and takes it down to a bank, because they cannot deposit those dollars and administer them through the credit union. Here locally, we have a credit union that the PTA attempted to open an account at the First Education Credit Union. Ironic, I know, and they're unable to do so because they typically operate under the school district's EIN. Subsequently, they're considered public funds. Mr. Chairman, and those are just a few examples of how this impacts not just local and state governments, but also members of credit unions. I would like to just highlight contributions credit unions make to all of your communities. In 2023 alone, credit unions contributed over $800,000 to 500 nonprofits, ranging from Boys and Girls Club, the First Ladies Hunger Initiative, our veterans, assistance to low income for heating needs and utility needs, Needs Incorporated, and more. Credit unions in 2023 awarded over $110,000 in scholarships to Wyoming students. They provided free financial education to over 8,400 adults and students. I go through that, Mr. Chairman, because I think credit unions are a significant part of Wyoming's communities. They partner often with our community banks on community projects. Another example I would like to share is, again, in Fremont County, the community banks and credit unions bonded together to help with a assisted living facility. When the facility was able to secure some funds, frankly, they were COVID-related funds that went through the state, but because they went through the state, they became state public monies, and the credit union did not qualify to assist with the implementation of that, even though they contributed. Mr. Chairman, credit unions in Wyoming can accept federal funds. They just cannot accept state. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pivot to overview of the State Treasurer's Time Deposit on Account program. If you look in your stack of handouts, I have provided you a list of excerpt from the 2023 and 2024 State Treasurer's reports. We bring this up because I would like you to take a look at the list of approved public depositories, and as well as the participation level in the program. In 2023, only 21 of 43 approved public depositories participated in the program. In 2024, 19 out of 42 participated. Mr. Chairman, that is a discretionary program that the state treasurer can deposit funds in Wyoming's community banks as well as national banks headquartered here. Deposits to out-of-state banks through that program in 2023 totaled 51 million, and in 2024, 124 million. Mr. Chairman, I don't want to go down a rabbit trail on the ESG discussion, but I do want to share that I find it ironic that we will close the door on a credit union that was chartered by several of them by our industries, and yet they're not eligible to receive public deposits. But we will, as Senator Nethercott indicated, allow deposits in banks that are not friendly to the state's industries. I've also would like to bring your attention to the handout that's just an example from 2024 Q2 deposits to provide you a breakout of deposits in banks versus credit unions versus banks, these headquartered out of state with branches in Wyoming. As you can see, if you look at that spreadsheet, Wyoming's credit unions held at that time 4.8 billion in deposits. Wyoming's community banks held 8.7, and the national banks headquartered out of state held 11.9 billion. I will just share with you, I would love to see the community banks and the credit unions bond together and figure out how to bring that 11.9 billion into our local economies and communities. Mr. Chairman, I know the tax issue has been addressed. I will not belabor that. Having said that, I want to just highlight a few of the statistics on your issue paper. Credit unions contribute to the state's economy. The federal not-for-profit status exempts them from corporate income tax because they're a not-for-profit entity. They pay property taxes in this state. Paid $3 million in property taxes in 2023. They employ 900 people in the state, all of whom pay taxes. They pay employment taxes. They are sales tax exempt because of their federal not-for-profit status. Having said that, several of our credit unions report that they do pay sales tax in the course of everyday business. Just as an example, in 2023, credit unions provided over $500 million in vehicle loans using the base sales tax rate of 4%. That would have generated $20 million in sales tax. Credit union members pay taxes on their earnings just like you would in other institutions. I personally just received my 1099 INT and I'll be paying taxes on my interest earnings, as I'm sure you all are. I think the safety and soundness issue has been addressed sufficiently. I'll hold any additional conversation for questions you may have. And Mr. Chairman, I would just close out by reiterating what Senator Nethercott shared, and that is I too personally do business with both my community bank and my credit union. It seems appropriate to allow our public entities to do the same.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Appreciate that. Mr. Schultz, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Shane Schultz, also on behalf of Wyoming's credit unions in support of this Public Funds, AKA Malt Shop Act. Just wanted to touch on a couple points to add to Mrs. Frank's testimony. Two issues that were brought up, at least on the Senate side, were around the issue of whether public institutions can actually handle or put money in with membership, being members or non-members. And so under the 12 CFR 70132, a federal credit union may receive payments on shares from public units in political subdivisions, and receive payments on shares from other non-members. And then additionally, in 12 CFR 745.1, in accordance with this act, it includes that those non-members permitted under the act to maintain accounts in an insured credit union, including non-member credit unions or non-member public units and political subdivisions. So that is allowed. They would just, in essence, be non-members. And then another point that was been talked about somewhat is how banks are regulated under the Community Reinvestment Act, and credit unions aren't. But the Community Reinvestment Act does not apply to credit unions because of the fundamental differences in their structure, purpose, and regulatory frameworks compared to banks. Credit unions are member-owned, not for-profit cooperatives created to serve specific groups of people. By design, credit unions are focused on community service because their community is defined by their membership. This inherent focus on serving their members aligns with the goals of the CRA without requiring additional regulatory oversight. CRA was enacted to combat practices like redlining, which were primarily associated for-profit banks. Since credit unions were not involved in those discriminatory practices and are inherently community-focused, Congress did not include them. Credit unions are member-centric, community-focused, aligning with CRA's goals naturally through their structure and mission. So that's one of the rationales on why they were not included in the Community Reinvestment Act, because they were already doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Committee, any questions for Ms. Frank or Mr. Schultz? Seeing no questions, thank you for the data. Appreciate the handouts that you provided. They're very informational. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Mr. Meyer? Thank you for being here. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association. And we had some very interesting testimony this morning, and I think maybe just to lay things out there for everybody to know, but we have nothing against credit unions. I'm a member of a credit union. My kids are a member of credit unions. And for 20 years of my legal practice, I represented credit unions. They're good organizations, and they do the things that they're supposed to do. But the playing field that they talk about that they're trying to level is not because credit unions cannot work with public entities. No, the disparity lies in the fact that credit unions and banks are two different types of entities and two different missions. I heard Mr. Schultz bring up a little bit a comment here, but I'm going to tell you 3 words right now and why this is important. Community Reinvestment Act. And contrary to what was said, it's not because the credit unions are not included in that because they're already doing it. That's not the case. That's a federal statute that was enacted in 1977 to ensure that each insured depository that's insured by the FDIC serves the convenience and needs of the entire community. Credit union's mission is to make sure that they represent their members, which is laudable and good. But under the Community Reinvestment Act, your banks who are insured by the FDIC have to invest in and participate with the community. That means low income and moderate income loans, subject, of course, to safety and soundness measures. They have to be participants with that area that's on the other side of the tracks. Credit unions don't. Credit unions don't have any of that requirement, and probably because they had pretty good lobbyists back then. But I've heard these conversations before. We already do that. One of the comments that was made today was that they gave over $800,000 in philanthropic donations. Knowing the credit unions that I do, I'll bet you that number is way low. They give a lot. They do a lot for our communities. They also have scholarships. Guess what? Your Wyoming community banks make philanthropic donations as well. They contribute to everything else in the community. They make scholarships. They provide internships. They do the same thing. The difference is while these are great things for your community, they don't involve those areas that the banks are required to be involved in to make sure that the entire community is served, not just the members. So why is that a distinction important? Because credit unions can take public deposits, taxpayer funds, and invest them in areas that have little to do with their residents of the community or the workers in that community. And that's why there's a difference. Now, I heard some conversation about the ownership, and that's true. But they've said, and you could have non-member deposits if you're a public entity. But understand that a credit union is owned by its members. They make the decision of what the credit union can do and can't do and what their policies will be. Banks, on the other hand, are owned by its shareholders, but are because of that shareholder relationship and the ownership of that relationship, they do have to participate in the Community Reinvestment Act. They do have to be involved in this. And that's one of those fundamental differences. Briefly, let's just talk a little bit, and I want to talk about the taxes, because there's a misnomer out here of what's going on. You heard the testimony that, yeah, people get their 1099s on the interest that they earned. That's not the total income of the credit union. I put my money into a credit union, I get a 1099. I put my money in a bank, I get a 1099. But I can tell you as a CPA for the last 40 years, that's not how these taxations work. A corporation, such as bank-owned or whatever, a C Corp pays taxes on its income at about 21%. The owners of that corporation, if they have an S election, a pass-through entity, pay that corporate tax at the individual level, which can be anywhere from 10% to 37%. That's on the earnings. That's not on the interest. Credit unions don't pay that tax. If you look at these things from competing head to head, they portray themselves kind of as, well, we're the mom and the pop shops for people of modest means. That's a $2.2 trillion industry that's mom and pop, right? No. One of the credit unions that I keep seeing on TV that has affiliation with the US Navy is huge. It's bigger than any bank that I know of in Wyoming. And the reason that they do these things is because they don't have to pay those taxes. How many of you have driven from Denver, from Cheyenne to Denver or back, and seen an event center that used to have the name of a national brewery on the side? It doesn't. It now flies the flag of a Wyoming credit union. That money, that doesn't come cheap. How many banks are you going to see down there from Wyoming? If you talk about some of the things that have been done here, we have a new, like I said, I'm a big fan of the credit unions, and there's one in particular that I love dearly, and I love its leadership. But the reality is they just built a brand new building a couple of years ago, and I'm sure you've attended legislative receptions there. They don't pay sales taxes on the equipment and the furniture and all this stuff. That's sales taxes that don't go back to the community. That's sales taxes that you and I pay. So there is a fundamental difference on how this works. When we talked about these taxes, Wyoming credit unions in 2023, and I don't have the numbers for 2024 yet, but in 2023, they avoided paying over $8 million in federal taxes. That's a big deal. But think about your constituents. The nurses in our state combined paid almost $57 million in taxes. The cashiers in your convenience stores, in your retail outlets in Wyoming paid almost $10 million in income taxes. And the teachers, one of my Wyoming's favorites, Wyoming teachers, paid over $16 million in taxes. And yeah, they pay their property taxes and they pay their share of payroll taxes and everything else. But this is the big disparity. For the tax exempt status, these income taxes are not just the only thing. It is the sales tax. It is all the things that we pay, that we are paying, that you and I pay for our communities and what we get. I struggle with the idea that we have on the handout that you got, there was a discussion in there about how much money was provided, $15 million in direct benefits to their members. Yeah, that's part of their savings, $15 million. You don't get to do that with the customers of the bank. That's why there's a difference. Then I hear the discussion about what's fair. So let me give you a hypothetical. General Motors and Daimler Chrysler are told you can sell as many cars as you want, of any kind. Just know that when you sell those, the profits from those are going to be taxed. But Ford Motor Company, we're going to let you off because all you're going to make is EVs. And everybody's agree with that. Right? But then Ford makes F-350s and then makes SUVs and everything else. But they're still tax exempt. Is that fair? Is it a level playing field? I heard conversations that, yes, we need to make sure that we're doing this because maybe some of the big banks, maybe they participate in ESG or what have you. That's an issue for the state, but I'm telling you what, there's no banks in Wyoming that can backfill on that big of money that the state has. The billions of dollars we have in there, do you think a credit union is going to back that up? No, they don't have that resource. So we're comparing apples to oranges here by saying, geez, these big banks, and money's going out to these big banks, that's because they're the only ones that can handle it. Talk to your revenue committees, talk to your appropriations, talk to the treasurer's office. That is why they're hamstrung, is because they're dealing with banks that are big enough to do this. Your Wyoming community banks and your Wyoming credit unions aren't going to do that. So you're comparing apples to oranges. Time deposits. I heard that discussion, and I think it's one of your handouts. How many banks are participating and how many are from out of state? Again, time deposits make difference about how big the bank can use to handle that. And interest rates make difference. This time with the fluctuating interest rates, and you realize that every institution, including credit unions, who, if they get involved in this stuff, have to post securities for everything over $250,000. Okay, when you look at the securities you're posting versus the interest you get, yeah, there may be some discrepancies out here. There may be some banks saying, I don't want to do it. This is not an issue where the federal credit union is going to step in and say, well, we can handle it. They got the same rules. So understand that this is where we're going. And finally, members of the committee, I heard the brief conversation about the constitutionality, and I'm not going to go down a lot of that because I haven't seen those Attorney General's reports, and I haven't seen the opinions that they've quoted. But I do know what the Wyoming Constitution says. And if you think that maybe the best way to do that is to change the definition of a word that's in there, sound a little bit Biden-esque to me, we're not going to change the Constitution. We're going to change what the word means. So I struggle with that. If you want to change the Constitution, then change the Constitution. We've done it before. We can do it again. So in conclusion, I'm looking at here at the limited government involvement in our lives. Is the decision to provide financial services by anybody making that election, do we assist those in providing those financial services with a government handout because we're going to not charge them the taxes? Are we considering the individual liberties that everybody has to run a business with fair competition? Or are we just considering a business that sounds like this ought to be fair while competing with a government subsidized entity? Are we looking at defending our Wyoming Constitution, or are we looking at saying, yeah, well, we can just, whenever we want, we can make a change to the word to make it fit? From the Wyoming Bankers Association, Mr. Chairman, our view is simple. If you want to engage in banking activities, then you should be regulated like a bank, you should be taxed like a bank, and have the responsibilities of a bank. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Any questions for Mr. Meyer? Start over here with Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a quick question on this, Community Reinvestment Act. Who determines the needs of the community? How is that done?
Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, that's a great question. How it determines, the banks have to provide information as to what they're going to do, and then it's overseen by federal and state regulators to see if that qualifies. So the ultimate speaking on that are the regulators. The banks come up with how they're going to do this, and this is how they deal with the needs of the community. So it's done on an individual level, but overseen by all the regulators. Something that the credit union regulators don't do.
Follow up, Mr. or Representative Campbell.
No, that's, because it seems to me that was the biggest deal. You know, I look at these as different vehicles doing different things within the community, but I was very curious what the qualifiers were for that.
Okay. Representative Schmidt, you had a question? No question. Anyone else for Mr. Meyer? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else in the room that would like to provide testimony? Seeing none online?
Mr. Chairman, Jeremy Gibson.
Gibson?
Ready to go?
Mr. Gibson, are you, please
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
introduce yourself and proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jeremy Gibson. I represent Toronto Valley Community Federal Credit Union and 30,000 members across Southwest Wyoming. I feel like there's been a lot of conversation today. I don't really have a lot to add to the senators and Bobby's testimony. So I'll just say that we are in favor of the bill and we would ask for the committee's support. And we'd be very excited to give the option to our local communities. And yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Any questions for Mr. Gibson? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mark,
Mr. Chairman, Mark Cowan, please.
all right. Treasurer Cowan, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Mark Cowan, Sweetwater County Treasurer, speaking on behalf of the County Treasurers Association as well this morning. We come to represent our support for this bill. The good senators work to unhamstring some of our investments that we can do in our communities. I think it's a little disingenuous to think that we might invest all of our funds into credit unions, but there is a good portion of funds that could be invested in our local communities with our local credit unions. And those funds in turn are reinvested with members of those credit unions in our local communities. So we appreciate that. Also, some of our investments, when I look at time deposits, typically CDs that I can buy from credit unions are 25 to 50 basis points higher than I can get in banks too. So we do feel a little hamstrung on our investments when we can only invest in banks. So we definitely would appreciate the passage of this bill and support this bill. And I'd answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Treasurer Cowan. Any questions for the treasurer? Treasurer, I've got one question. You have a community credit union there, and if you were to invest quite a bit of this county's money into that credit union, would it be your desire to have a seat on the board of that credit union in the future?
No, I would have no intent of doing anything like that at all.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your testimony, Treasurer.
Thank you.
Being online for us. Anyone else? Okay, so that concludes public testimony. We'll close public testimony on SF 143. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Lawley, seconded by Representative Schmidt. Any discussion? Would you like to go through the bill line by line, page by page?
No, not really needed.
Okay, any discussion on the bill? Any proposed amendments? Question being called. Mark, this is a roll call vote on Senate File 143, Public Monies, Deposits, and Credit Unions.
Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Knapp has voted aye also. Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Lawley.
Aye.
Representative Riggins.
Excused.
Representative Schmidt.
Absolutely aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Chairman Heiner.
Aye.
The vote is 8 aye, no noes, and 1 excused. This would pass.
Okay, Senate File 143 has passed the committee and will be placed on general file. We will proceed. Thank you for all the testimony. Thank you for being here, Majority Floor Leader, and for bringing this bill. And Representative Larson, you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. We will proceed now to Senate File 195, Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program. We have the Senate leadership here today. But this is quite a pleasure and honor for our little community.
Thank
of the
you,
Minerals
guys.
Committee in the
Oh,
House.
it's Good to be over here on the House side of things. And
We get to hear from Majority Floor Leader Nethercott, now the President and Vice President of the Senate.
Well,
Please.
unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, I can't follow the majority floor leader, so she set the bar. Whatever the bar's at, we're coming in underneath it. So
All right,
just letting
well.
you know that ahead of time.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you this morning. Senate File-
President, in the House, we introduce our, I know it's different over there, but introduce
bet.
yourself first for the record.
Senator Bateman, Senate District 21.
Senator Salazar, Senate District 26.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Senate File 195, Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program. What we're doing here is, this program aims to provide short-term bridge loans to small businesses affected by declared natural disasters, ensuring they can quickly recover and continue operations. I came up with this bill while I was out fighting fire on the Elk Fire and seeing the devastation from just miles and miles of fencing gone, people scrambling to find hay for their critters, to move their critters. It kind of started out as an ag idea, and then it morphed into, well, we were just a mile or two away from having the town of Dayton wiped out if the wind wouldn't have shifted directions at 2 a.m. that one fateful Saturday morning. So got to thinking, what would we do in this kind of a situation where we can basically keep our small businesses operational in a time of a natural disaster. This program does that by providing these zero interest short-term loans to allow them to quickly be approved through their local banks and get the funds they need to continue their operations and to begin rebuilding immediately instead of waiting around for 6, 7, 12, 14, 16 months with their hand out for any federal aid or disaster aid, if any comes their way. So I'll walk you through the key provisions of the bill, and then I'll walk you through the bill. So for eligibility, you must be physically located in Wyoming and in a disaster declared county. Then we gave that authority to the governor in the bill. So if the governor declares a disaster area, then any small businesses operating in that declared disaster area would be eligible. The businesses must have been operational before the disaster. You have to have at least 50% ownership or more than 50% ownership in the business with a minimum credit score of 550. You have to put up collateral. Certain industries are excluded for obvious reasons. Loan terms of the loan, it was up to 1.5 million per business, but in the year-end gross copy, it got amended down, it got cut in half, so I think it's at 750,000 now. Like I said, it's a secured loan, and so you're gonna have to put up either your expected insurance proceeds as collateral or business assets or any other assets you have. It's not an unsecured loan. Repayment period's up to 3 years, and it's a revolving fund, so as loans are paid off, it goes back in the pool for other people to be able to borrow from. And we also put in a provision for charitable donations, because another thing I learned when we were out on the fire was people would be showing up at our fire hall with money, food, supplies, Copenhagen, you name it. They wanted to help out. They didn't know how, but they felt helpless. The community just wanted to rally around the firefighters. This gives those people an opportunity, if they wanted to participate and help pay off some of these loans, they can donate money into this account. So it's a good little feature there. Administration, right now, it got amended on third reading. I originally thought this would be best suited for the Department of Ag. but it got amended over to the Office of State Lands and Investments, so you'll see that in the bill. Original idea was to have the department approve or deny loans within 24 hours. We amended that up to 5 days. So still the idea being we don't want this to be a bureaucratic mess. If it is, if it turns out to be one, just kill the bill, because that's not what I want. I want something quick. I want yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down, disperse the money and get that money out there. We don't want to create a new bureaucracy in the state of Wyoming. We want something efficient and something that serves its people well. So let's see where else. Yeah, that's about it. So I'll walk you through the bill. You'll see on the bottom of page 2 is where we create the Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program. Talks about the eligibility on page 3. Page 4, page 5. Again, this is the meat of the bill. Page 6. Page 7. Okay, here's on page 7, I forgot to mention. So in order to pay for this and to pay for the bankers' time that wish to participate in this program, they don't have to if they don't want to, but if your local community bank wants to participate, they will get 2% origination fee. Well, actually 1% to the bank, 1% to the state for the cost of administering this. So people don't work for free, and this is an opportunity for them to be able to participate and get paid for it. So the lender will pay a portion of the fee. And at the bottom of page 7, not to exceed $750,000 for each business. Page 8 is the secured, the collateral expended for only business purposes. We had a lot of questions about what ifs. What if they did this with the money? What if they did that with the money? We didn't want to be too prescriptive in the legislation, but the legislation gives out some basics, what the money could be used for, but I imagine the rules will be promulgated to be a lot more tighter on the specifics of the program, and I trust the department to do that. So I didn't want to get too prescriptive in the legal language here, but you get an idea in paragraph 4 there on page 8 what we're talking about. And paragraph 5, not to be expended to expand the business. So you can't just get a 0% loan and then grow your business, go buy a new tractor or whatever. So it's just common sense, but stuff that has to be in the bill. Let's see here. Page 10 is the appropriation. It was a $50 million startup from the general fund. Now it's $25 million for the program. Vote it up, vote it down, do what you want with it, but that's the bill. And I'll stand for any questions, or Senator Salazar, if he has anything to say.
Well, I was going to testify.
Vice President Salazar.
Mr. Chairman, honorable members. I was going to testify on this, but I think he did a pretty good job summing it up. So support the bill. You know, these are our folks who are obviously in an emergency situation. They can't wait for us to come back into session. They need their small business to stay alive during the time that we're out. So ask your due consideration, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. Any questions? Vice Chair Tarver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senators, for bringing this. So I've had some constituents reach out and they're waiting on the federal monies to come. And I guess we know how the federal government works at the snail's pace. And this really, I can see where this bridge might really help them get through to that money. And I assume that's what this was brought forth for. And do you have constituents that are in the same boat?
President?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we even are eligible right now for federal money. I don't think it's been declared, so we've got people in a tough spot. Because, you know, but luckily the community's all pulling together, and we pulled together in August, September, and we've helped a lot of neighbors, helping neighbors and things of that nature. But, you know, if there's this bill, I forgot to mention also, we expanded it to include infrastructure failure. And as we all know of a particular dam in the central part of the state that could collapse at any minute, and this would incorporate that as well. So those people that are downstream from that could get wiped out and they could apply for this as well. So we're just trying to think of anything, we have blizzards, we have fires, we have tornadoes once in a while, infrastructure problems. This is for those major unforeseen circumstances that make sure that Wyoming doesn't miss a beat and we can keep moving and get our people the help they need if they want it. They don't have to apply if they don't want it. It's not a giveaway, it's a hand up, not a handout, and you gotta pay the money back and you gotta secure the loan. But for those that are serious about getting back on their feet right away, this is the way to do it.
Follow-up, Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one last question, is the 25 million, do you feel that's gonna be appropriate to, do you feel it needs to be higher, lower? Where would you like to really see this?
President?
Mr. Chairman, I had it at 50 million. 25, I think is a good start, but if we get a big problem, we'll have to definitely appropriate more money to it if there's a big need there, but we'll take what you give us and we'll stand this program up, so looking forward in the future, we'll be prepared.
Representative Weber, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, senators, for being here. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. My question has to do with, you had testified earlier that you had thought it would be better under the Department of Ag. What were those conversations about and how did it get moved to Office of State Lands?
President?
Mr. Chairman, the move came on a third reading amendment. We lost it by one vote, so there wasn't much conversation about it other than the fact that the Office of State Lands, it was said, administers these types of programs already. Department of Ag doesn't. At the testimony on the Senate side for this bill, in front of the Ag Committee, the Department of Ag said they could do it and they would be happy to help us out. So it's just a policy choice at this point, I think, for you guys to make, and I trust you guys and I trust your judgment. How you want to see this program run?
And President, by doing that, doesn't it open up more than just agriculture? It can be other small businesses as well, and then it kind of supports that philosophy.
Mr. Chairman, this is already opened up to other small businesses. It does have kind of an ag focus because that's primarily who is affected by a lot of these natural disasters as our ag community. But like I said, if a town got flooded out or something happened like that, they would be eligible for this program.
Thank you. Follow-up, Representative Weber? Representative Lawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. And again, I think this bill is a great idea, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what you can tell me about what the requirements are for the governor to issue a natural disaster. Are there certain things, or is it just he or she would just decide it would qualify and make that determination?
Mr. Chairman, great question. I didn't want to get too specific on that. I wanted to respect the separation of powers there and trust the governor's judgment.
Follow-up?
Thank you. No, thank you.
Any other questions for the President or Vice President? President, I've got one question. We're trying to come up with a plan to help the ranchers that got wildfire devastation. And there's ideas in the Senate, the Chief Executive Office has their ideas, the House has their ideas. Could this program be incorporated into the ultimate solution that we come up with for the wildfire devastation? Could this be one of the legs of the stool that we utilize?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, it certainly probably could be. I didn't come to session with that in mind. I was looking forward to the next disaster because this will take time to stand up with rulemaking and getting the program going, and the banks learning how to administer this program and help their constituents out. So it will take some time to stand this thing up. So I don't think it's, if you're looking for an immediate solution to the current problem, I'm not so sure that this can do it. Hopefully, when it's stood up, and if there, God forbid, if there's still people in need by the time this program's up and running, maybe that's something the governor could look at and declare that retroactively. But this is more of a forward-looking bill for the next disaster that we all know will happen. It's just a matter of when, not if.
All right. Thank you, President. Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President, Honorable Senator. Is there any capitations on this? My concern is, when we get in looking at necessary trucking and transportation, there's other industries that are much larger industries, and I'm just wanting if there's any kind of capitations put on those anywhere, or if you think we should, sir. Thank you.
President?
Well, like I said, when I was walking through the bill, Mr. Chairman, I think you're referring to page 8, where we're trying to limit what you can use it for. A lot of that will be developed through the rulemaking process. We tried to lay out like a basic idea in the statute of what the limitations are, because if you start listing out every possible limitation in a bill, the thing's gonna get very unwieldy, and then you may miss something, and then you've got problems. So I try to keep it as broad as possible.
Any follow-up, Representative?
No, I very much like the intent. I like the speed's everything to where I like that. I just don't want to have any unintended consequences, I guess is the word we all hear. Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Okay.
sir. Thank
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much,
Thank
President
you.
and Vice
Mr.
President.
Chairman, we got to head up for some meetings, so we won't be around to answer any questions, but thank you for listening to our bill this
So
morning.
we'll make up the answers as we go there. We're politicians. All right, any other elected officials? Any citizens here representing only themselves? Thank you for coming to our meeting. I appreciate you being here. I love to have citizens testify. That's important to us, to hear from the citizens.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Matt Michaeli, and while I am and have been a registered lobbyist, I'm here today just on my own behalf as a Wyoming citizen. I'm an attorney here in Cheyenne, a firm called Holland and Hart, but most of all, I'm a fifth-generation Wyoming ranch kid. And I think like most of you, we've seen these disasters come, and my heart's just been broken, right? And we've all had friends and family that had to go through this process. And I just wanted to take a minute and congratulate and thank Speaker Nyman and President Biteman for their forethought in this legislation. I think it's a really important piece of legislation. We've all seen, again, people who have been in these disaster situations, and they need that money now. We all know insurance companies can be difficult to deal with, and it takes a long time to get that money. And I think President Biteman did a really great job of walking through the bill. I'm grateful for the protections that are in there. I think it does protect, it prevents types of fraud or people trying to abuse the system. I'm grateful for the speed that's in there. I think that that'll really help. And I just wanted to emphasize, again, from my point of view, I have donated to a lot of these different things that have come up to try to help these, but to have a fund there that you can donate to, that you know is going to get to the right people and it's going to be done efficiently, is a benefit. I'm also grateful that it's all voluntary, right? That people that suffered from, they don't have to participate in this, but if they need it, it's a great tool. The bankers don't have to participate in this, but we know that our community banks and our, they want to help, and they get some compensation for it, not a lot, but it's voluntary for them to come in and participate. I just think this is a very well thought out bill. It's very similar to what Governor DeSantis has done in Florida. Florida has a few natural disasters and some experience with this. And so I just wanted to just take a minute as a private citizen to thank the Speaker and the President for bringing this. I think it's a good bill, and I think it's something that will really help the state of Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. Michaeli. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Michaeli? Thank you for being here and for your testimony. Any other citizens in the room? Seeing none? Mr. McNagnon, I assume you're representing an organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am, although I'm also a citizen who could be impacted by something like this in the future. So I look at it from both perspectives.
Please proceed, Mr.
I am Jim Bergagner, representing the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. I had the opportunity to work with President Biteman in developing this concept, and was really pleased with the interest he showed in it, what we were able to accomplish. And I think the key word in this is timeliness. When the fires all started to break out in northeastern Wyoming this past year, we started a voluntary contribution collection to help people who were impacted by fires, the ranching community up there. Fortunately, we were able to provide an immediate assistance to over 30 operations, approximately $500,000. And that's not much money in terms of what these people faced, but the number of ranchers who responded and said, you know, that $10,000 or that $25,000 that came 5 days after I requested assistance was so critical to me in enabling me to move on to the next step, to move some livestock if I had to, or to immediately buy a load of hay, things like that, that are so important. And I think that's the value in this, that it's can be responsive in a timely manner. We were particularly anxious to have this work as it does through local banks, because I know working with the ranching community, there's often a reluctance to enter into some government program, to use the term somewhat broadly. In this case, they work with the banker that they're working with every day, and that banker makes the determination whether they're creditworthy and submits that application to the state entity that will be involved in disbursement of funds. But it's so much more comforting to work with your local banker than it is to reach out to a government agency that's in Cheyenne if you happen to be in Newcastle or someplace. And I think that's really important with this. We had proposed and liked the idea of the Department of Agriculture being the administrator of the program, simply because they can move rather quickly on things. There's no reason that the Office of State Lands can't do this, but there's going to be some things that will be critical in the development of the rules. And one of those is that typically any loans that are made by the Office of State Lands and Investments today go through an approval process with the State Loan Investment Board, and they meet typically every 2 months. This won't work if I need money now and I have to wait for 2 months. So I think it's going to be critical in the rulemaking, at least, and I hope we can accomplish that, to say that as long as these basic criteria are met, the director of the Office of State Lands can approve this loan and the funds can be dispersed in a very timely fashion. So that's something we'll be watching very carefully. The only other item in here that makes me perhaps a little nervous, but depends on how it works, where it says that the loan will be guaranteed by insurance proceeds. Again, because this needs to be very timely, at the time that you apply for one of these loans, you may not know yet what your insurance proceeds are. They haven't been received yet, maybe not even applied for. And on a lot of ag operations, a lot of the things, you know, your fences and that aren't necessarily even covered by insurance. And I'm hopeful that this can work in a way that if I've got evidence that I'm going to be eligible for a federal program, for example, that provides disaster assistance, that could serve as security to enable me to acquire these funds. And so I'm not sure that particular phrase in there means that you have to have potential insurance proceeds committed in order to use this program or not, but that's the one part of it that I'm still a little nervous about. But beyond that, we think this is helpful. It's not for everyone. We have many producers that truly do need some grant type assistance, and I know you're looking at that in some other legislations moving through the process. But I think grants together with low interest, or in this case, no interest loans, provide the right combination of factors that we can utilize to help as many people as possible going forward with this. That, Mr. Chairman, just express our strong endorsement of this and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Magagna. Representative Lawley, I can see you have a question.
Mr. Chairman, you're clairvoyant today. I don't know if that's a Valentine's Day thing or.
It's a good night's rest.
Well, good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I wanted to kind of go back to your issue concerning the insurance proceeds. Because I think that you've made a good point there of, would you feel like, I don't know if you have the bill with you, but on page 8 where it has that provision about be secured by insurance proceeds, would it be sufficient to address your concerns to include perhaps some federal benefits or something like that that could also be used in addition to insurance proceeds?
Mr. Magagna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Lawley. I think that is a place I would say perhaps federal or perhaps it could even be broader and say be secured by insurance proceeds or other anticipated revenues as a result of the disaster or something. So it's not just the revenue that you're gonna sell your cattle in the fall, but you have some specific source of revenue. So it could be insurance proceeds, it could be a federal disaster program, it could be another state program that you're utilizing. A little more flexibility there, I think, would be helpful.
Follow up?
Thank you very much. It's very helpful.
Any other questions for Mr. Magagna? Mr. Magagna, following that paragraph, it talks in paragraph 4, subparagraph 4 on page 8. This bill apparently was written right after our wildfires, and so that was fresh on the mind of everyone that contributed to this bill. And the way this reads, it's expended only for business purposes, and then it delineates a lot of agricultural things, fence repair, replacement of livestock, et cetera, et cetera. But we know here in Wyoming, disasters can affect more than just ranchers. We've had, as you mentioned, floods, which can affect other small businesses. So I'm just wondering, is this verbiage constraining this loan program from helping a small businessman, or individual that owns a small business in a town that gets flooded or has a natural disaster? And this is very, it looks purposeful, talking a lot about agricultural relief, but will that limit the relief that can be extended to small businesses?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps it doesn't limit it because it does say business purposes, which may include, it's not mandatory. But on the other hand, if I'm a small downtown business that my restaurant burned up or something in a small community, and I'm looking for assistance, and I look at this legislation, I think there's some legitimate concern, and I might look at this and say, oh, this isn't for me. So it might not be, it might be helpful if retain the list of items for agriculture, but then which may include, et cetera, temporary facilities for business, like temporary facilities for the business to operate. I think that's intended to be broader. So in that one is, but if you had some, I don't have anything right on top of my head, but if you had a couple of other items you would add in at the end of that to make it clear that it's not just intended for agriculture, we would certainly be comfortable with that.
Thank you, Mr. Magagna. And in that paragraph, it says ranch vehicles, but as you mentioned, if you have a restaurant and you have a delivery vehicle, would that make it more difficult for that delivery vehicle because it's not actually a ranch vehicle? And it does say may include, so that loosens it up a little bit, but I'm just a little concerned that that verbiage may be restrictive to other entities that may have a natural disaster as well. So if you have any suggestions over the next long weekend, I would be open to that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to work on that because I think you make a very valid point. You know, it should be business vehicles, not necessarily a ranch vehicle. Some of these are specific to ranches, but others could be anything that impacted something local out there. So I'll be happy to work with developing some thoughts on it and share them with you not later than, assume you'll be back here Monday night, as I will too if we're not snowed in western Wyoming.
Unless there's a natural disaster.
Unless there's natural, right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Magagna. And Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Magagna. My biggest concern with this is, and again, in Romanet number 4, where it says only for any business purpose. I think this bill is geared towards small business, but any business means that anybody can do this. And for $25 million, if we're replacing fences, one big ranch can burn through $25 million in fences. Is there any way that we could specify this down to small businesses? Is there some sort of capitation we could put to where it's hitting the folks that need it, not the billion-dollar ranches that have $35 million worth of fences?
Mr. Magagna, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, I think that's the intent, and I note, just as I look here quickly on page 9, it says, there is created a small business emergency bridge loan account. So it's emphasized there that it's small business. Whether that term needs to be introduced in, or some limits in other sections, I'm a little reluctant to put numerical parameters on it because many, what I consider small business, family farms and ranches across the state may have investments on improvements on their land that would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm not sure how you can draw that, but that was certainly was the intent, that it be small businesses, and that's pointed to there. And I think there was one other occasion I'm placed in the book that.
Page 7, just to interject, page 7, it says not to exceed $750,000 for each business applying. So that does limit it. Is that correct, Mr. McGagna?
Yes, that is correct, yes.
Had to formulate a question there somehow. All right, any follow-up?
And I point to on page, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, on
Yes.
page 5 where it talks about has to have one or more persons who own not less than 50% of the business. So I think that also points to a family business, not a major corporate structure.
All right, thank you. Very good, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. McGagna?
No, thank you both. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Chairman. That is a good qualifier.
Representative Lawley, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up, and some of that could be, parameters could be set in rulemaking. Don't you agree? I think that the rulemaking on parameters concerning what is a small business, what isn't a small business, that would give some flexibility based on community circumstances and things like that, that could be done through some rulemaking.
Mr. McGagna?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I think so. That's typically the best place to sit down and have those in-depth conversations, working with the staff in that office and design this so that everything is relatively clear to potential applicants and to the local banks that may utilize this program. And so I think there's a lot to be put in there, but that is typical with a new program that's rather complex, that we can't get it all just in legislation.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. McGagna? Seeing none, thank you very much for your
Thank you,
testimony.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meyer, welcome back. That could be dangerous. Two of you. Mr. Meyer, please proceed.
Good afternoon, or good morning, Mr. Chairman. Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association. I just want to add a couple of things in there because we, along with the Wyoming Stock Growers, had a chance to work through this stuff. And again, it was because of last year, but I think as Senator Beitman said, we're not necessarily looking at trying to fix that particular incident, but we're looking forward to see where we go with it. A couple of things that I noticed that through the conversation, at least through the testimony of Senator Beitman, but the way this thing really works is that the banks will step in much similar to like how it was done the PPP loans, but in concept, the banks will look at the information that has been brought to by the individual looking to get some help. And then the bank will look at that and make an assessment, looking at the risk, looking at with potential collateral, what have you, and then make that recommendation, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever, to the decision makers. Keep in mind that even though that said insurance proceeds, and then it talks about, equipment, land, and what have you, but typically nowadays, correct me if I'm wrong, but ranchers and farmers have various different sources of income that may be considered. You might look at wind leases. You might look at royalty payments. You might look at a lot of different things that are doing their, I'm starting to see now more and more statistics showing more and more sales from the farmer's market, whatever. But that we're not looking at just at the insurance proceeds. We're trying to look at everything that person, that business owner has in order to make sure that the loan is viable. And this is one of those Community Reinvestment Act things. We just want to make sure that they have the credit worthiness to do this. That goes then to the state. And unlike what Senator Beitman said, but the banks do get a 2% origination fee. 1% comes from the state itself, and 1% comes out of the proceeds that go to the individual borrowing the money. So I think that we look at this and we say, this is a pretty good deal. I guess one other thought that I have, and I'm certainly not complaining, explaining, but how all this stuff happened on that third reading, I'm not sure. I mean, I know there's politics going on and things happening, but really the idea was at 50 million. And that was because there are a lot of businesses we think about in terms of this as ag, but there were outfitters, there are tourist people, travel agents, there are people in town, motels that didn't have because people aren't going through there. There's a lot of businesses that may be affected. And so the idea is that we want to be as inclusive as we can, understanding that whoever's applying for this, first it has to be a natural disaster. And the second thing is to make sure that they qualify for the loan in the first place. So it surprises me a little bit that they want to make, and I understand the budget and all this, what have you, but this is not a guarantee that this money will go out. It's just making that money available. And so in our conversations with the community bankers in Johnson and Sheridan County and some of the others, they understand what this is for and they understand why their customers are needing this. So maybe something for this committee to consider, how they maybe putting that back. It's just one of those things. The other thing is that, and I think the conversation was brought up, and I think it's a very valid one, moving this from the Department of Ag, who probably has not a lot of experience in this, to the SLIB board, who maybe has more experience, but it's the timing. And we talked, that's what the testimony was, it could take up to a couple months because they only meet every so often. Now, maybe they can change their schedule or what have you, but this is really something that these small businesses need to know and need to know now. They can't wait. I mean, some of the stuff that Governor Gordon and I talked about a little bit, how do you take care of these businesses, whether it's the infrastructure failure or whether it's natural disasters? If you have to wait till you get to the legislature to get money, these are some of those things that are popping up there saying, let's figure out how we deal with this really quickly. So I look at that, we are definitely in support of this. It certainly is an option for the banks to do. They're not forced to do this, but we have banks in some of those areas that are trying to figure out exactly how they do this because they know they need to help. We had banks here in Laramie County that were sending money up there just to make sure that they had it, and again, no place to put it. So I think it's a good bill. I'm a little bit disappointed to see how they made some of those changes in there, but that's for you guys to figure out. But we certainly stand in support of that, and we had the opportunity to work with stock growers. We just think this is a good bill.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Representative Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Meyer, I know there's some certain criteria to classify as a small business, whether it's number of employees, annual revenues. Do you happen to know what that criteria is to be classified as a small business?
Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schmidt, I don't know that there is actually one definition for it. I mean, if somebody has an S election, they can only have so many members in it before, what used to be 20 is 50 on a tax basis. The Small Business Administration, the way they do stuff, they define it differently. I don't think, Representative Schmidt, that there is any hard and fast rule as to what is classified as a small business. It's kind of like, what does it look like to me today? And which organization is looking at it.
Follow-up, Representative? Representative Campbell, and then we'll come over here to Representative Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again. My concern is the 550 credit score is a qualifier. Are banks going to look at somebody with a 550 credit score and qualify them for a loan?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meyer.
Representative Campbell, I don't know if there's a cutoff. I mean, that credit score that's in there is a factor. But the way I do it in kind of layman's terms is that lenders look at 3 C's. The capacity to repay, the kind of collateral that you have, and the character of the person. So if you look at it and you say, we know this, and I've known plenty of banks that do this, and especially around even in Cheyenne. If they know that person, and they know that that person's not going to default, I don't care what happens, they'll give up everything they have, that's the kind of character that they want. That credit score may not be as important as somebody that is, you know, great, they don't have a lot of debt and they're pretty good out there, but they're kind of a shyster. The same thing is what kind of collateral they have. And like I said, there's income streams, there are assets, maybe that are not collateralized by a bank already. Maybe there's other methods that they look at. So I would just tell you, Representative Campbell, that that credit score is a factor, but it's not the only determining factor.
Any other questions for Mr. Meyer? Mr. Meyer, I have one before we continue on here. The idea behind this bill is to expedite help to those in need as quickly as possible. But this is being administered through the financial institution, and hopefully they can respond quickly, but you already have criteria to protect the loan that is made by an institution. So I'm assuming you're going to still follow through with that same criteria, even though this is going to have to be expedited as quickly as possible. And you will still adhere to vetting those loans, as you mentioned, with the 3 Cs. So we're not going to let down any of our walls to get this money out quickly, like sometimes happened during COVID with federal money, where it was just given out quickly more than was quick. The speed was more important than you know, I guess protecting the integrity of that loan. So do you see this as being something that you can respond to quickly and still protect the state with the state's money that they are loaning?
Mr. Chairman, I do. And I'll tell you why. I think that if we are providing that service to the state, if we're vetting those loans, then again, it's the safety and soundness factor that entered to make sure that that loan is something that's there. Because this operation is only by those who elect to get into it, they will be in fact knowing that, and we just mentioned the rules, that's, the devil's always in those details to figure out how they do that, but as far as what's gonna be there. But yes, the safety and soundness of those loans has to be looked at by the bank just because what is being presented to the state's relying on. Now, they don't really have any liability on there, but reputation is everything, Mr. Chairman. And so, yeah, I think that it would be safe to say that they'll be looking at all the assets, the things to determine that loan, including the safety and soundness.
I heard that from my father a lot, the integrity.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Meyer. Any other questions for Mr. Meyer? And Mr. Magagna, you should have sat down when you had the chance because we have another question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Magagna, I'm trying to work on this possibility of this provision on page 8, Romanet 4, where it's about expending on only business purposes. And I just had a question I thought in particular you could give me insight on is, here they've kind of designated, made a distinction between farm vehicles and ranch vehicles. If we just use the term business vehicles, would that be too restrictive for the ranching and farming community? Or do you think would be understood that it would mean both ranch and farm vehicles?
Mr. Magagna.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, no, I think that would work well, business vehicles.
Okay.
And that would cover anything that is critical to the operation. If I have a historic car that I have stored on my property and it burns up, and that was my pleasure vehicle, that shouldn't be included. But if it's something that is utilized in the operation of the business, I think that would be very adequate.
All right.
Thank you.
Any follow-up?
No, well, I guess I would just follow up with this. Is there anything else you see in there that needs to be kind of very specifically for the ranching and farming community stated in the way that it's stated?
Mr. Magagna.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I'm just quickly reading this again, but this is maybe technical and could be addressed, but it says leasing of land for livestock grazing. I guess it would occur to me, what if you're leasing land for crop production?
So, Mr. Magagna, you would recommend striking for livestock grazing and just say leasing of land? Is that what you're inferring?
That's what I'm suggesting, or maybe even again, a place to broaden all of this, which we had discussed, would be, say, leasing of land for the business purpose.
Good. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Chairman, looking at that thing too, and I agree with my good friend here, I wonder if in that paragraph, Romanet 4, if it says be expended for any business purpose which may include, comma, but not limited to, comma,
Oh.
fencing, and that way it makes it really clear that this is for small businesses and not just for the agricultural industry.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer, for that suggestion. All right, thank you for your testimony. Ms. Frank, thank you for being here and welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bobby Frank. First, on behalf of Wyoming's credit unions, obviously we're included in the bill. The credit unions are supportive and willing to help their members and communities in the event of natural disasters. I'm taking off my credit union hat and putting my rancher hat on now, Mr. Chairman. Support the bill. Just a side note, my husband and I own and operate a registered Angus ranch northeast of here. Just devastated for our friends and neighbors in the north part of the state during the fire season, as well as close to us up on the cut across by Chalk Bluffs. I love the section that allows for donations through this fund as well. My husband and I made a decision to donate a heifer that we took to the livestock auction to help support the fire recovery in the northern part of the state. That donation resulted in the resale of that heifer multiple times, generating a pretty good chunk of change for fire recovery. The notion that that could go into a fund like this and then be invested by the state treasurer's office to perpetuate that in future years is a great thing for the state, to allow for us to grow that down the road for folks dealing with these. And one other thought, Mr. Chairman, from my old conservation district days back to Representative Lawley's question on the narrow language of anticipated insurance. I would just throw an idea, and I'm thinking out loud, so this could be kind of dangerous, but back in my conservation district days, if they passed a mill levy, there was always a gap between when the mill levy was passed and they actually received the income, and they could go to the local bank and get what was called a tax anticipation warrant. And I almost wonder if that type of a concept in terms of language for anticipated revenue and not so limited to the insurance issue. I mean, in our case, if we had a fire, we may be having, we sell seed stock, have a bull sale, that's anticipated revenue. So that's just a thought, Mr. Chairman. With that, I'd happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Appreciate that. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the room that would like to provide testimony on this bill? Seeing none, online, Mark, Tanner, no one online. With that, we will close public testimony. Members of the committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Weber, seconded by Representative Ralali. Any discussion? Do we want to go through this line by line? Or let's go page by page. There will be some change proposed. Anything on page 1? Page 2? Page 3?
Mr. Chairman.
Turn on your mic.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I think it's worth at least the committee having a discussion about the Office of State Lands investments versus the Department of Agriculture. And so I guess I'm just throwing out what thoughts people have before proposing any amendment there on that issue.
Any discussion on that? Representative Weber.
I think what the bringer of the bill talked about was for the speed of getting these loans out with the Department of Ag. Also, some testimony stated that the Office of State Lands may have more experience in that. What I have seen with any disasters has been, speed is of the essence. You need that, you need those financial resources today, not in 2 months.
Any other conversation? Representative Campbell.
I'm not sure that the Ag Board is much faster than the SLIB Board, to be very honest. I think that we should be looking at another vessel to maybe emergency management or something along that line, something that actually has the ability to be quick. That was one of the issues that we were talking about on another bill with the state fair, was to get reaction time. And that was one of the complaints that the state fair brought, was that the Ag Board did not have the reaction time to bring them into the modern world. So we need to find a body that does have the reaction time to make this bill work, I believe.
Thank you, Representative Campbell. Representative Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of right now, I'm personally okay with it staying with SLIB. If we can come up with something better, I don't know if right now is the time to make the decision. I think I may even reach out to, or OSLI, not SLIB. I might reach out to them, and I wish they were here actually to testify. Unfortunately, they're not, but reach out to them, see what their thoughts are. Like maybe Representative Campbell said, maybe it's better under emergency management, so Homeland Security. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think to make a decision now might, we just aren't making it with a whole lot of information, so.
Thank you, Representative Larson. As was provided in testimony, the SLIB Board is more accustomed to loans and this kind of financial instruments. But even though they only meet monthly or bi-monthly, I've seen them respond quickly when the time happens. If there's a declared natural disaster, there's nothing that precludes them from having an emergency meeting. And with those 5 elected, they're right here. And so my opinion is, I think the SLIB is better than any other organization that could administer this. And it'd still be through the banks. They work almost every day. They seem to have a lot of holidays, but the banks are going to be the first line of defense. So that is my Representative Lawley, please.
Yeah, well, I thank you for the discussion, and I tend to agree, and the key becomes on page 3, lines 4 and 5, the promulgation of any rules necessary to implement this program. And the statute clearly, this bill clearly lays out a timeline, of an emergent nature. So I think the rules would be promulgated to accommodate that, whether it be emergency meetings or just letting this Office of State Lands, which could operate under the authority of the SLIB Board. And so I tend to agree to leave it, but I just thought we should have the discussion.
And I appreciate that. Okay, going on to page 4, any changes? Any discussion on page 4? Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8. Let us pause. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to suggest amendment on page 8, line 1, and after the word proceeds, insert the language or other anticipated funds. So it would read, be secured by insurance proceeds or other anticipated funds that the business will receive as a result of the natural disaster or other land equipment assets owned by the businesses.
Moved by Representative Lawley, seconded by Vice Chair Tarver. Any discussion on this proposed amendment? So, question being called. Members, we are voting on a proposed amendment on page 8, line 1. After proceeds, to insert or other anticipated funds. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? That amendment has passed. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I propose another amendment on page 8. And again, this is my attempt at trying to balance the language a little bit for applicability, to other types of small businesses that don't involve ranching and farming specifically. So again, beginning on line 6 of page 8, after the words "which may include," insert the lawyer's favorite phrase, "but not limited to." And then continue on that line. But then when we get to line 7, delete farm and put business. And then there will be the word vehicles, which will remain, but then after that comma, delete ranch vehicles. And then on line 9, it will read in the natural disaster, and then after that comma, inventory replacement, comma. And then it will read the leasing of land for livestock grazing and put business purposes. And I think that's it. That amending that is my motion, is that amendment to Romanet 4 on page 8.
Okay, so just to be clear, with the proposed amendment, it will read as in Romanet number 4, be expended only for any business purposes, which may include, comma, but not be limited to, comma, fencing repair, the replacement of livestock, the replacement of buildings or shelters, striking business, or striking farm and inserting business vehicles, striking ranch vehicles, and equipment damaged or destroyed in the natural disaster, and then inserting inventory replacement, comma, the leasing of land for business purposes, striking livestock grazing, and necessary trucking and transportation expenses, and finishing that paragraph. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Representative Weber. Any discussion on this proposed amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Lawley's proposed amendment on Romanet number 4 on page 8 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Proceeding, anything else on page 4, or page 8, I'm sorry. Page 9. Representative Schmidt.
Yeah, I raised the question about the definition of small business. I'm pretty sure there's a definition out there, and if I remember correctly, it's like less than 500 employees and maybe 25 million in revenues. Anything less than that is considered a small business. Is there any concern? I know this is limited to, I think, $750,000, right? My concern is that I don't know the area that well up there, if there's a lot of big corporate ranches up there or not. But could they take advantage of this and take it away from what I think the bill is designed for the ranches that I think we're trying to help, and that's the small mom and pop operators. Maybe the limit of the loan is going to kind of keep that in check. But those big corporate ranches have staff. I mean, they can burn through these things pretty fast rather than sitting burning the midnight oil on the kitchen table trying to fill out an application like a mom and pop operation. So I just want to make sure that we're not hurting the mom and pop operations that I think this bill is really designed to help.
Thank you, Representative Schmidt. And on page 5, it says that one of the criteria is that one or more persons have to own at least 50%. So I think that was designed to help corporations, or prevent corporations from taking advantage of this. But any other discussion about that concern? Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of agree with Mr. Magna, but I cannot get your name right. I am sorry. But I agree with that this is something that I think could be done through the rulemaking process. I think the intent is clear in the bill enough for them, and we're waiting, and I know for me, in territories that it might be, I might be constraining in how I might try to define it when we are dealing with family-owned ranches and different dynamics, and even with this different kind of small business. So I just would, I guess I take some comfort in that with what's in here and the idea in the rulemaking where they can maybe even zero in a different way to define small business in the ranching context, in the agricultural context, and then a different definition for other types of businesses. Because that's one of my concerns is one definition doesn't necessarily cover both of those kinds of operations very well. So it might be unintentionally constraining in a way. So that would be my thoughts on that.
And Representative Schmidt, I would encourage you to do a little research on what the definition is of a small business and maybe bring that as a member amendment in Cal if you find something that would be appropriate.
I can do that.
We don't have the resources to put that in the standing committee amendment right today, but it could be a member amendment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anything else on page 9? Page 10 and page 11. Members, any further discussion? Question being called. Oh, we have sorry, jumped the gun here. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do support this bill, and I want to say the reason why I didn't make a motion on page 10 to increase that back to 50 million is I think this bill has to go to appropriations because there is an appropriation in it, and I think that's something that committee should have to determine with all of the spending that we're taking out of our savings over through this session. So that's why I didn't feel it was appropriate for this committee to weigh in on that, and they can do that in their committee. So,
All right, thank you, Ms. Representative Larson. Any other discussion before we vote? Question being called. We're voting on Senate File 195 as amended. Mark, would you please call the roll?
Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Knapp has voted aye. Representative Larson.
aye.
Representative Lawley.
Aye.
Representative Riggins.
Excused?
Representative Schmidt.
Aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Chairman Heiner.
Aye.
Vote is 8 aye, 0 no, 1 excused.
All right, Senate File 195 has passed the committee as amended. I'm assuming Representative Nyman will probably carry this on the floor. Without any other business, we will adjourn. Thank you, committee. Have a long and enjoyable